Hi, this is Art. Okay, so assuming you're here because you're a first-time home buyer and you want to know a little bit about the typical steps involved. Well, the first step obviously is to find a home that you like enough that you want to submit an offer to purchase. The offer to purchase is often known by the acronym PASA. That stands for Purchase and Sale Agreement. So how do you fill that out? Do you have to be there in person? The answer is no, you don't have to be there in person. How it's typically, typically the pages are completed or filled in is via email. So if you have an email address, it makes this process very quick and very easy and very simple. Your real estate agent prepares the purchase and sale agreement, emails it over to you typically the same day that you find the home or townhome or condo that you want to submit an offer to buy. All you need to do is digitally sign it. And how do you digitally sign it? You type your first and last name in one time, and then the computer program remembers it, and it'll allow you to simply click in the spots where it requires your signature, and that's typically on the last page. The purchase and sale agreement is approximately 10 pages long, and usually you only sign in one spot, which is on the last page. That's also where I would sign if I was your real estate agent. The seller would sign, and the seller's real estate agent would sign. So there's typically at least 4 signatures on that page. Sometimes more if there's multiple sellers, and more if there's multiple buyers. Okay, so how do you digitally sign? You simply type your first and last name in, and there will also be spots in the 10-page purchase and sale agreement where you need to initial. How do you initial? You type your initials in one time, and then the program remembers it. If you're using, if I'm your agent or you're using any other Keller Williams agent in any of the, any states across the country, and Keller Williams has offices in every state, so I hopefully chances are good that you're using a Keller Williams agent. But we at our office we use a software program called dotloop. So dotloop is easy for me to use as a realtor, and it's easy for you to use as a client. We find the property that you want to offer on today. I go to a computer, prepare the document, email it over to you. You digitally sign and initial. As soon as you're done digitally signing and initialing, the document is immediately automatically emailed back to me. I review it again, and then I email it off to the seller's real estate agent. That person reviews it and then submits it or emails it to the seller. Once the seller signs it and the seller's agent signs it, and it comes back to me, now we typically have at least 4 signatures: yours, mine, the seller's agent, and the seller's signature. When I deliver that document, in other words, email it to you, and all the parties that needed to sign an initial did so, at that point, legally, we have what's called a contract. So as soon as you have a completed contract, that you get a 10-day free look. In Florida, there's a 10-day inspection period. So what does that mean? It means that you have 10 calendar days from the moment we have a contract, not necessarily from the day you sign. You might sign today. If today's Monday, the seller might not sign until Tuesday or Tuesday night, and then we don't get the completed contract back until Wednesday morning. So if that were the scenario, then your 10 days would start on Wednesday. So it's whatever day we have a completed contract where all parties need to sign, that's when the 10-day clock starts to tick. So it's important for you to already have a home inspector in mind that you want to use. You as a buyer get to pick the home inspector. I, of course, have home inspectors that I have relationships with that I can also recommend. And here's something you want to consider. If you're using your own home inspector, before you place an offer on a house, you might want to call them and say, hey, what does your schedule look like for the next 2 weeks? Because if you get a signed contract back in the next day or two, and then you call your home inspector and say, okay, I need you to go inspect this property that I'm thinking of buying, and they tell you, oh, we're all booked up, I can't come there for at least a week or 10 days. Well, that's not going to work in this scenario, because you only have 10 days total to schedule the inspection, get the inspection completed, get the inspector's report back so we can review it, so we know what repairs we're going to ask for the seller to pay for. So that all has to happen within the first 10 calendar days, as soon as we have a signed contract where all parties who needed to sign an initial have signed. Okay? So now, what happens if we find something major wrong with the house? It's got a cracked foundation. If we find that out, because we had our home inspection done within the first 10 days, you can get out of the contract. You can walk away and get your deposit back. Now, we didn't talk about a deposit yet, but you typically have 3 calendar days to put a deposit down. So a deposit might be as little as $1,500 or $2,000, but within 3 calendar days of signing the contract, right, where everyone signs, you typically have to either wire the deposit money funds or drop off a check to the seller's title company. In Florida, you can use a real estate attorney to purchase or sell a home, but people typically don't. In Florida, they typically just use title companies. So the title company is the entity that holds the escrow account. So your deposit would be held in escrow, as long as and you would have to deliver that to the title company, either wire funds or drop off a check. It could be a personal check, but they hold the money in escrow, and then they wait for us to complete our 10-day inspection period. As soon as if we're within the 10-day inspection period and we find some major flaw with the house, the foundation's cracked or the AC compressor blew up, and we go back to the seller and say, hey, we want you to pay to have a new one installed, and they say, no way, I'm not doing that, and you want to get out of the deal, we can get out of the deal and you can get your money back. You can get your deposit money back, but we have to do that within the first 10 days. Okay, so first 3 days, deposit money. First 10 days, inspection period. There's another period, a third one, called the 5-day window. From the moment you have a signed contract, you have 5 days to initiate a mortgage application. Mortgage applications typically take 30 to 45 days to get approved. But we just need to start the mortgage process, so you need to have a mortgage application on file and in process within 5 days of us having a signed contract. So you got the 3-day window to get your deposit delivered to the seller's title company, and that's put in the escrow account. You can get all of that money back. If there's some major flaw with the home that we discover within the first 10 days, we have 10 days to schedule your home inspection, complete it, get the inspector's report back, and then ask for any repairs that we want the seller to pay for. And then you have 5 days to get your mortgage application started and in process. So those are the typical steps. If we get past the inspection period, we negotiated repairs that the seller's going to pay for. Now, the only thing that really has to happen is your mortgage lender has to complete your underwriting process for your loan, and the bank, your mortgage lender or whatever bank they deal with, is going to send someone out to inspect the home. A second person, not your personal home inspector. And by the way, you as the buyer pay for your home inspection. In Florida, a home inspection, it can vary depending on how large a home is. Some inspectors base their rates based on square footage, but it can vary anywhere. Like a condo would maybe cost you $250 for a home inspection, but it can be $300 or $400 or $500 in that range as well for a very large home. So I've given you an idea of what the 3, 5, and 10-day windows are. I've given you an idea of what to expect in terms of submitting an offer. That's called the PASA, the Purchase and Sale Agreement. That's typically a 10-page document. I've given you a general idea of the loan process. And if we get past the 10-day inspection window, you still just have your deposit money in escrow. And then, of course, whatever down payment money you would be required to bring to closing, they would deduct any money that you put down as a deposit. You're not going to lose that money. You'd get credit for it at closing. Who's the bank going to send out to the property in addition to your home inspector? Someone called in appraiser, and the appraiser's there to make sure that whatever purchase price we and the seller, or you and the sellers, agreed to, the appraiser's there to protect the bank. The appraiser's there to basically assess the home and make sure if you submitted an offer for, say, $200,000 on a home, the appraiser's going to make sure that that home is worth, or in other words, is going to appraise for at least $200,000 or more. Okay, what happens if your offer price is $200,000, but the home appraises for $195,000? That's called an appraisal cut. In that instance, we open up negotiations again with the seller, and we say, okay, well, how are we going to resolve this issue? Because the buyer was willing to pay $200,000. The bank's saying the home's only worth $195,000. We have a difference of $5,000. Typically, the amount is split, but the seller doesn't have to agree to it. If the seller does not agree to say, okay, I'll kick in $2,500 and you're going to bring an extra $2,500 to the closing table, seller doesn't agree to that, seller can walk away from the deal. You can walk away as well. So that's the only exception to beyond the 10-day window, the inspection window, of how deals that are in process and look like, okay, we're going to go all the way to closing, sometimes we don't. And that's only when in rare instances where the appraisal comes in lower than what the offer price that you made on the home. What else? Let's assume within the first you found the home you love. Within the first 3 days, you put a small deposit down with the seller's title company, and again, the seller gets to pick the title company. Now, in cases where the seller's like, I don't care, and if you have a title company in mind, you can pick the title company as the buyer. Or if you don't have one in mind and the seller doesn't have a title company in mind, I can recommend a title company, a local one that I deal with regularly, that I know is thorough and will do a good job. So that's the process there. Then you have 5 days to get your mortgage application started, and then you have the 10-day inspection window. Okay, so let's say we're beyond the 10-day inspection window. The bank sends out the appraiser. Your offer was for $200,000, and the appraisal comes back at $215,000. Well, that's great news for you as a buyer. Why? Because the bank is saying that this property is worth $215,000, and you're getting it at a discount on sale. You're only paying $200,000 for it. So when you actually, on the day that you close, you'd be closing and you'd have instant equity in your home. So that's the best case scenario for you as a buyer, is that the appraisal comes in substantially higher than what your offer price was. Okay? What are the two main costs you're always going to have as a buyer? One, your down payment money. And I have a separate video that you can watch on the Florida Bond Program, which typically offers $7,500 that you can use towards your down payment money and or closing costs. And so it's your down payment money is your one typical cost as a buyer, and closing costs. How much are closing costs? Well, they can vary, 3, 4, 5% of the purchase price. Sometimes closing costs can be affected by your credit score. So if you have to pay like points, what the mortgage lender calls points, that's like additional money that you're going to be required to bring to the closing, the day of closing, in order to get a lower interest rate on your mortgage loan. Okay, so hopefully that process gives you hopefully my description here in this video gives you an idea of the general process of what you would go through as a first-time home buyer, what to expect along the way. Of course, I always suggest using a full-time realtor, someone who can be available to you, every day at some point during the day if you have questions, because questions typically always arise, and you want someone who's full-time versus part-time, and someone who's available to you to answer your questions and to help guide you and walk you through the process. Hope that helps, and best of luck on buying your first home.